Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the City Club for inviting me to share with you this afternoon. It's always an honor and a privilege to stand before such a distinguished group and share the Chicago Teachers Union vision for public education in our city. I love baseball. When I was a kid, I used to dream that one day I'd play right alongside Manny Minoso or Sandy Koufax, because I was going to be a pitcher. And my knuckleball wasn't too bad for a second grader. But on the field, I owned third base. Nobody was going to get past me. And I had the knees and elbows to prove it. So when I was 6 years old, my father took me next door, because I lived right next door to a playground. And he wanted to teach me how to bat left-handed. He said he wanted me to have an advantage, whether I was playing with friends, or when that day came when women were allowed to play in the major leagues. Daddy reminded me that perfect practice makes perfect. And that if I was going to be an all-star and immortalized in Cooperstown, I had better work hard. So you all are laughing, thinking this is not true. This is so true. I just want you to understand this. But my father said to me, talent alone, Karen, does not make one great. Discipline does. So every day I could, come rain, snow, or shine, after homework and dinner, that's on weekdays, or lunch on weekends, I'd go outside and I'd practice my pitches with my Nellie Fox glove. I know, right? Over and over, I drilled it into my mind how to swing, how to hold my bat, all these kinds of things, my stance, my crouch, because I was going to be prepared. And I was going to be drafted by the White Sox. Oh yeah, I was going to be drafted. And I was going to hit a home run, and people would cheer and call my name as I rounded the bases and headed all the way home. That was my dream. And my parents never discouraged me. They never told me how unattainable my fantasy was, or that girls couldn't play in the majors. It didn't matter that some of the boys in my neighborhood balked at choosing a girl to be on their team. Daddy said, don't be afraid to step on that playing field. And he said, show them what you've got. And my mother said, don't listen to the naysayers. Keep your head up high and keep moving forward. So it wasn't long before I became the secret weapon. A girl who could throw a perfect slider, a pitcher who knew how to bat left-handed, and I made my share of mistakes. But like my parents taught, I learned from them and then I moved on. As lifelong educators who had great careers as Chicago public school teachers, my parents instilled in me a sense of purpose and told me that as long as I dared to dream, they would do their level best to provide me with the resources, tools, and environment I needed to succeed. But in order to succeed, they said, I still had to have the dream. And I had to dream the world that I wanted to live in, and it was then my responsibility to go out and create it. So it didn't matter if it was baseball, or being a famous surgeon, or a Hollywood filmmaker, or an award-winning chemistry teacher. No matter what manifestation my life would eventually take, I understood that first, I had to dream. Second, I had to develop discipline. Third, I had to step on the playing field. And fourth, I had to ignore the naysayers and keep my head high. Fifth, learn from my mistakes. And sixth, and more importantly, we keep moving forward. So I can't help but think of these lessons as I enter my second term as president of the Chicago Teachers Union. This was a job I did not want. Make no mistake about it. In fact, I'm a little bitter because I was supposed to retire in June. You think I'm kidding? I'm very bitter about this. Because But I love the classroom. And as a chemistry teacher active in my union, what I desired, though, was a union that would not only be strong, active for my rights as a laborer in the public schools, but an organization that would be the strongest advocate for my students. I dreamed of a union that was vocal, engaged, productive, creative, and visionary. So when the members of my caucus, the caucus of rank and file educators, or CORE as we're known, dared to dream about challenging the leadership of our union, the best we thought we could do was win a few seats on the executive board. In fact, we brought in a well-known labor activist from British Columbia to speak to us. And she even said, in her own way, that winning a seat or two on your executive board may be very well all you can do. And then you should be satisfied with that and try in the next 3 or 6 years. That was Jenny Sims. She doesn't really talk like that. But something has to be said about dreamers and self-determination. So here we are, Jesse Sharkey, Vice President, Michael Brunson, Recording Secretary, Christine Maley, Financial Secretary, and the rest of our team of committed, dedicated professionals. We are reshaping the Chicago Teachers Union into a strong organization for our members, but also, and more importantly, a strong advocate for our students. We had to create our world, articulate our reality, and restructure the guts of our organization, where we maximized our passion for teaching and learning and utilized our strengths of research, organizing, and advocacy. So here we are, turn 2. As you know, this newly energized CTU is often in opposition with the status quo. Those who are in power, many of whom have never stepped a foot in a classroom, but inhabit editorial boards or make millions at the top levels of corporate-owned skyscrapers, or promulgate in the halls of our legislative bodies. We are sometimes in opposition with those who have been inside the classroom, but have forgotten the true mission of our profession, and have instead opted for payouts, bonuses, lucrative management, and educational consulting contracts. The new CTU is an organization of believers. We believe in publicly funded public education, and we believe that we can have a system in Chicago that is equal to or exceeds that of those school districts in Finland or Japan. And we believe this. Why? Because we understand the meaning of the word priority. Instead of having the distinction of having one of the best school districts in our nation or the world, Chicago now has the distinction of having closed the most public schools in a single year in US history. Priorities. Instead of talking about the innovations in learning and the teaching profession, people are talking about how art, music, physical education, and creative uses of technology are stripped from the core curriculum in Chicago and replaced by rote learning rituals, online programming, and attacks on educators and other public school employees. Instead of working with parents and community, Chicago has the distinction of blaming parents and caregivers, accusing them of academic neglect, depriving students of resources, vilifying their communities as places devoid of love, support, and culture, labeling their teachers as failures, and stereotyping their school communities as dismal failures, despite the rise in test scores and in graduation grades. With fewer students, fewer employees, fewer buildings, CPS continues to maintain that its fiscal deficit is mounting and that their cuts save little and they do little to improve the quality of education for our students. Priorities. There is nothing innovative, bold, or visionary about closing schools, firing teachers, paraprofessionals, and clinicians, and attacking the pensions of our retirees. There is nothing innovative or smart about cramming 45 kids into a single classroom than declaring their schools underutilized, or that any teacher who criticizes the status quo is unqualified or should lose their job. There's nothing innovative about that. There's nothing visionary about rehashing a 5-year plan that was rehashed 5 years ago by 5 different CEOs. There's nothing visionary about that, especially when most of the administrators who will be tasked with carrying out said plan usually don't last for 5 consecutive years. Bold thinking says no schools will close. Bold thinking says we will not balance our budgets on the backs of children. Bold thinking says we will exhaust every avenue, identify every available opportunity to keep our public schools well-resourced, appropriately staffed, and open. Bold thinking creates strong school communities, not weakens them. Bold leadership declares an end to corporate subsidies and loopholes. It calls for progressive taxation. In Illinois, while the poor and working class pay an effective tax rate of more than 10%, the top 5% are systematically advantaged by the tax code, paying a mere 4.1 to 6.5% of an effective tax rate. And if the tax rates for the top 5% wage earners in Chicago were equalized, at least another $160 million in revenue would be made available for children's education. A Center on Budget and Policy Priorities report revealed that total K-12 education cuts for fiscal year 2012 were about $12.7 billion. Pay Up Now just completed a review of the 2011-2012 tax data from the SEC filings of 155 of the largest U.S. corporations. The results show that the total cost of K-12 education cutbacks in recent years is approximately equal to the amount of state taxes left unpaid by these companies. For 2011 and 2012, the 155 companies paid just 1.8% of their total income in state taxes, and 3.6% of their declared U.S. income. The average required rate for the 50 states is 6.56%. So, given the deficit claims, CTU has been investigating how to generate new revenue for our school district. What are some of the other potential revenue streams? TIFs. We've been talking about that for a really long time. So, the portion that CPS gets back from TIFs has been designated for capital construction, not to support direct instruction of our students. But the distribution of these funds has also been grossly inequitable, providing a quarter of all TIFs to elite selective enrollment schools, even though they are only 1% of CPS. Less than half of the TIF funds went to neighborhood schools. Of the $2.45 billion in TIF dollars spent from 2004 to 2008, the Loop, near North Side, near South Side, near West Side communities received $1.56 billion, or 63%. More than half of the 171 TIF projects finalized between 2000 and 2010 were located near the Loop. Since 2000, nearly $100 million of TIF funds have been given to corporations to move their corporate offices to the Loop or keep them in the city. Last month, as the board was preparing to close our schools, Chicago Teachers Union elevated its protest against the Bank of America. BOA is profiting from and hurting Chicagoans of all classes by participating in predatory lending that led to the foreclosure crisis, by illegally speeding through the foreclosure process and taking possession of homes that were faithfully making mortgage payments, and by using unethically high interest rates on the debt swaps for the CPS capital improvement projects. The so-called underutilization of CPS schools can easily be tied to excessive home foreclosures in certain neighborhoods, most notably Austin, Inglewood, North Lawndale, Roseland, South Chicago, West Inglewood, West Pullman, and Woodlawn. These communities have been devastated by years of community disinvestment at the behest of city officials, and most of these communities have also seen charter proliferation. Their families have been driven out by the foreclosure crisis, and more of the public schools are being shut down every year. Families lose their homes, teachers lose their jobs, children lose a trusted community institution. It's as if there were a concerted effort to make sure that these are not walkable, thriving, healthy communities. We are currently hearing about the reduction in library, art, music, and special education program because of the school-based budget cuts. For every $1 million that the Bank of America has earned from toxic swaps in the last 5 years, there are over 10 library, art, music, or world language programs that will be eliminated. If the banks had not crashed our economy, the district would now have nearly $180 million more to invest in our classrooms, an amount that would restore all of the cuts to the better school day throughout the city. Renegotiating out of a bad deal sends the signal that CPS is looking out for its taxpayers and the schools. The district has paid out hundreds of millions on these bad swap deals since 2008 and are on track to pay hundreds of millions more unless they renegotiate the terms of these agreements. In Illinois, while the poor and working class pay an effective tax rate over 10%, the top 5% are systematically advantaged by the tax code, which we talked about a little earlier. At the city level, a combined city income and commuter progressive tax between just 0.5% and 1.5% can generate close to $1 billion for the city, with half going to CPS. So imagine if CPS had $600 million more in revenue in addition to the nearly $300 million a year from tips and swaps. We would be having an entirely different conversation about improving early childhood programs, wraparound services, adult education, anti-violence initiatives, expansions of nurses, counselors, school social workers, etc. But how does the state give $98 million to UNO, yet our schools are losing millions of dollars because of corporate loopholes? This makes no sense to us. There's a financial transaction tax bill gasping for air somewhere in Springfield. We need to take a closer look at what this legislation would do for our schools. Dr. William Barclay, an economist and researcher, says that between 2009 and 2012, the total revenue that could have been raised by an FTT of $1, that's $1 contract paid by the seller and the buyer, from all the contracts traded on the Chicago derivative markets, except options on individual stocks, range from about 6.3 to 7.4 billion. Dr. Barclay says that the total revenue then that could have been raised by financial transaction tax could have generated $10.6 to $13.1 billion. Now, CEO Barbara Byrd-Bennett has asked the CTU to offer revenue solutions to the district's budget crisis. So this is a start. Now, the only question remains, when will the CEO and the mayor join with CTU to lobby for these important reforms? Because our children cannot wait, and our schools deserve our advocacy. The CTU wants to work with our leaders in City Hall, Springfield, and at the board to solve these sorts of problems. But we can't work together on these issues because they keep creating new problems. There's nothing radical about me other than I want each and every student in Chicago to get the best education we have to offer, an equal or even better equitable education. Last year, we issued the Schools Chicago's Students Deserve. It's our comprehensive plan for strengthening our schools. We are pleased to see that CPS has taken some of our recommendations. Preschool and kindergarten, restoring art, music, physical education. But We encourage the board to act with deliberate speed to rid the district of this vast level of inequality. We desire collaboration. We want the respect of our profession and of our expertise. We want to be partners in making Chicago School District one of the strongest in the nation. Look at Montgomery County, Maryland, as an example. There, the school superintendent, the Board of Education president, the president of the Principals Union, the Teachers Union, and the support staff unions get together to develop the district's budget, the education plan, and a way to implement it. Parents, employees, and the administration working together. That is how you build trust. You don't build it in CPS silos. And you don't build it by ignoring parent, community, and teacher voice. As long as the status quo of elites continues to impress upon our district these horrible policies that may work very well in corporate environments but are simply not good for children, the Chicago Teachers Union will be portrayed as oppositionists. Members of the status quo, the people who are running the schools and advising the mayor on how best to run our district, know what good education looks like because they have secured it for their own children in well-resourced public and private institutions. In a city with over 600 schools, there are 600 different theories on how to offer students a high-quality, well-resourced education. And what a student receives differs from campus to campus. And every year, CPS moves the bar on what excellence looks like. Some schools have iPads and well-equipped science labs, and others have no toilet paper or working computers. So why do the most disadvantaged children get the least? Why is it in a city with rising levels of homicides and violence that our students do not receive the appropriate social and emotional supports? But what does it say about our district, and what does it say about our priorities? What we have, unfortunately, is more top-down chaos. We have principals who are under a one-strike policy. If they make one mistake, they can lose their jobs. This creates a climate of fear, and this culture of instability trickles down to the classroom. So instead of speaking out against these horrible school reform experiments being imposed on them by the district, year after year, many principals quickly and haphazardly attempt to implement them. And when one doesn't work, they move on to the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. This past Friday, the board abruptly announced it would lay off over 850 employees, nearly 5 of them teachers, as a result of the school closings and turnarounds. They even want to get rid of nearly 150 bus aides after promising the public those children would have to travel long distances to their new welcoming schools, and they'll have bus services. So I guess the kids will have to ride those buses by themselves. We fear that this is just the tip of the iceberg. With CPS's billion-dollar deficit, put that in quotes, they can and will eliminate more teaching positions and other jobs. And who will be impacted the most? Teachers of color, tenured teachers, and older, more highly educated employees. And where will this impact be felt the most? In predominantly African American communities. And when are we going to ever address the elephant in the room, the big elephant in the room? When will there be an honest conversation about poverty and racism and inequality that hinders the delivery of an education product in our school system? When will we address the fact that rich white people think they know what's in the best interest of children of African American and Latinos, no matter what the parents' income or education level? And when did all these venture capitalists become so interested in the lives of minority students in the first place? There's something about these folks who love the kids but hate their parents. There's something about these folks who use little black and brown children as stage props at one press conference, while announcing they want to fire, lay off, or lock up their parents at another question. I know no one likes to talk about race, especially since so many people believe we are living in a post-racial America. And even though Chicago remains the most segregated city in the United States, but there is nothing wrong with dreaming that everyone is equal, and that all playing fields are even, and that all everyone has is this equal opportunity to get ahead. But we have to work on this together to make it happen. Whether they want to be bus drivers or bankers, it is our job to give our students the best, high quality, and equitable education available. This is our responsibility, it's our obligation, and it is our job to encourage the dreamers, to give them a stable and supportive environment and the tools and discipline they need to succeed. Langston Hughes said, "For if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly." Let's give our students wings, not clip them. Every student in Chicago Public Schools deserves to have the same quality education as the children of the wealthy. I believe this, and this is what I'm working on. And this isn't a dream for a utopian or perfect world, but this is what we can and should have for our city and for our students now. Continuing CPS policies and budgetary priorities that disinvest in neighborhood schools have failed to serve most students and need to be discontinued. In conclusion, let me say that I told you in the beginning that I love baseball. But in 1969, I fell out of love with the sport after the Cubs lost to the raggedy Mets. I just couldn't believe it. I was done. I was just done. And up until 2009, I wanted nothing more to do with the sport that as a little kid I once vowed to make history as the first female pitcher in the major leagues. I knew I was going to have that 90-mile-an-hour fastball. So I turned my sights to tennis, and every now and then a good old boxing match. But now I'm a huge White Sox fan. And going to the games now is bringing back all of those feel-good memories I have of my father. And I'm glad to be in love with the great American pastime again. But you know, my jilted love affair with the Cubs got me to thinking. There's always a way back. There's always a way back in with baseball. Despite all the crushed dreams of many Cub fans year after year after year, they continue to fill up the stadium. No World Series wins, but the fans still show up. Despite the curse of the GOAT, the fans still show up. They cheer, they love the players, they root for the home team. When the Cubs lose a game, they don't call for Wrigley Field to close down. They don't want the entire team dismantled. And despite some empty seats, the stadium isn't accused of being underutilized. The owners don't kill the franchise. They don't bastardize the team. They don't demoralize the coach. Well, they might demoralize the coach, who then demoralizes the players. The owners don't blame the fans for every missed ball or strike. They honor the players' contracts. No, I'm just saying. No one questions their salaries or tries to steal their pensions, and rarely does the public even attack their union. They invest in the stadium. They want to make it better and even outstanding. And year after year, despite individual player performance, despite game losses and near wins, the fans continue to show up. We keep cheering for our Cubbies. We know they're winners. We dream. We believe. We don't let the statistics drive our belief. but do the same for our children. Cheer them on, invest in them, love them, support their parents, support their teachers, support their schools. Let's work together. Let's win Chicago. Let's do it.